Hey guys, I'm Mark. I'm going to be talking about females in video games and general gender differences in the industry. Just an introduction, I'll be talking about the representation of females in the industry and the representation in similar fields like computer science. Then I'll go through the pay differences between the genders in the actual video game industry. Then some potential reasons for why the industry is in its current state. Then sort of how all that sort of translates onto the screen in video games. And then a brief look at some of the views from the video game community from a quick survey. And then sort of are we on the right path, sort of what's good's happening, what's bad's happening still. So the representation in the video game industry. In 2009, only 10% of the video game workforce was female. More recently, it's gone up to about 22%. However, most of those jobs that have been made for females have been in public relations, because only 11% of game designers are female, and only 3% of the programmers are female. So in broader computer science, in education, there's only 12% of computer science degrees were awarded to women in 2011. That's in the US. And that's opposed to in 1984, where 37% of such degrees were female. And so in the workforce, in the most recent study I could find, it's reported that 20% of the workforce is female in general computer science related jobs. And again, in the mid-1980s, this was around 38%. And it's been on a sort of steady decline ever since then. The gender pay differences is probably the biggest sort of area where it's quite staggering. On average, it's more than $10,000 less for women for the same job in video games. This sort of little graph shows that in programmers it's about $10,000. Designers, it's more about $12,000, and then if you're an artist and animator, it looks like the difference is about $26,000. 33% difference in pay for the same job. So a few reasons that I thought that could be why the industry is in this current state is the obvious one, as I said before, is there's less women in related educational courses, and so you can't really hire someone who isn't qualified. I've looked into some people's research, which I want to look into more for my actual essay, about people thinking that there's just innate genetic differences which cause people to go into different careers, about how the brain works for males and females. Then there's the whole stereotype and stigma around video games about being a male-dominated thing and about it being not a very feminine thing to do. And then there's the previous generation's ideals in the industry. I read through a little thing about just how sort of the top dogs in the video game industry don't treat the women the same as the men, which I want to look into more for the essay. And then there's just the decades of marketing, which video games predominantly do with male audiences, which worked, and then they continued it and sort of excluded the female audiences. So how this translates into video games themselves. So in 2012, there was a study done that with games with an exclusive protagonist, under 10% of them were female. And in 2015, of the top 50 mobile games, 98% of them had identifiable male characters, whereas only 46% had female characters. And then there's the whole topic of the overall objectification and sexualization of video games, such as fighting games with their so-called armor for females, which aren't really armor. And then again, which everyone talks about here, is GTA 5. There's just a lack of substance in all the female characters. And when you do find one that does have sort of substance to it, you only get to do a story with for like 2 minutes or so, and then they're done. And so then I looked at a time survey of about 1,400 middle and high school students in the US. And those who identified as gamers in the survey, they said that 70% of the girls, they didn't care what gender they played, and 78% of guys didn't care. On average, the older guys cared less, but the older girls cared more. 55% of the boys who identified as gamers think that there should be more female heroes in video games. 57% of the overall believe that female characters are too often treated as sex objects, which is, it's a good number, that's more than half, but it's still fairly low considering that I think more people should think that they are treated too much as sex objects. So then, are we on the right path? Well, the good things that are happening is that the social perception of video games are changing for the better. Sort of the stigma around it is becoming more involved and less male-dominated. And female characters are becoming more abundant, and they're becoming more popular in AAA games, which is a good sign. And then there's also the less overall sexualization of women. But then there's still the against things, which are there's still a low percentage of women in the educational roles. The women are still paid less, and there's the whole issue of treatment on job, which I want to follow up on in the essay. So in conclusion, females are still unrepresented in the workforce and they're underpaid. There's an ever-decreasing amount of females studying in the related fields. And then I went over how that sort of translates into the characters and how females are portrayed. Sort of what the video game community thinks of this, and then the overall aspects of the change that's happening. And the extra things I just want to cover is sort of how the representation in the other video game roles. I only sort of covered the programming and sort of computer science and all the other fields that relate to that. Then I also want to have a quick look at the portrayal of men in video games, see what differences there are. And then, as I said before, I want us to look into the actual direct treatment of the different genders in the workplace, and then how diversity affects workflow and how it comes in the workplace overall.
Questions? I just wanted to ask, when you back about the statistics of like 57% of females said they thought that most female characters were over sexualized. Do you have any figures for how many men thought that?
I think that was
overall, wasn't it?
That was it.
Oh, it was overall.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of the reason why women aren't getting into computer science degrees is because they don't actually know what programming is or computer science in general, and just think it's like, oh, it's software or using computers or something they don't actually know. In primary school and secondary school, until they go to college, they don't actually figure out what it is, that they're just misinformed rather than not going into that, that they go into something that is just generalized, that they may not, be informed about fully.
You could also argue that's the case for a lot of men too, because programming is not taught well in schools or at all.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I mean, I'm not sure what it's like here, but in Australia there's no forced computer science or anything in high school or primary school. And I think, yeah, if you did have that sort of introductory thing of what computers are, what programming is, then you would get a more, I think, even amount to further education.
What do you think would be a good way to get women into the industry, or any ideas?
I don't know, it's hard because a lot of it's got to do with sort of the stigma around it, and it's hard to remove that, especially when you've got big sort of media still portraying it as a male-dominated thing. Like even things like Big Bang Theory still shows it's the nerdy, white guy thing. But
Will you talk about Gamergate?
I might, if I.
Well, how can you explain? I never understand the difference between the salaries.
Yeah, that's the one thing I couldn't find any
How do you
research of why it's.
How is that a thing at this day and age?
10% less?
Yeah.
It's for the exact same job.
Yeah.
That's what it says. Yeah, they don't have like the breakdown of exactly what the
Where
positions
did
are.
you get
But
those data again? When was the study done?
that was 2011. Game Development Magazine.
Game magazine.
That was
It
done.
doesn't say it's for the exact same job.
In
But
a
it's
sense,
just, it's vague, it just says programmers, designers. So it's more likely that the head programmer would be male,
And team development.
so he'd be paid more. And
Mm.
But then there's still
Check-
why
yeah.
more high-end male and
because
females.
there's more than.
Yeah.
I suppose the probability of a hire of a
And also,
head programmer is
what's
just
called
really not bad.
the whole quote, was it women earn 70 cents to the men's dollar or something, was based on that. It's not actually for the same job, it's a different job.
Check the sources of that, you know, see if it's exactly the same. So,
Because I know Intel pays women a lot more. Actually, if you get a raise in Intel and you're a man, you get I think 500 extra. If you're a woman, you get 1,500 extra.
Yeah, if you recommend a woman to Intel and woman gets hired, you get more money than if it was a man.
show the other side.
For scholarship, for programming just for men.
Good topic, Mark, good topic. Well,